Good morning, ladies. This is Julie from Totally Holistic Health, and in the last week or so we've been talking about Brahmacharya, which is the fourth of the yamas, the restraints that are part of the Yoga Sutras. So I thought I was going to post this last week, but I've been thinking about a practice that we can do that's maybe slightly different. So it's quite hard to, when you're doing a yoga practice, relating to sort of self-restraint and moderation and in sort of terms of the sort of like the asanas to actually use. So I decided to scrap what I was going to do, and I thought it'd be quite a nice, interesting practice to try yin yoga practice using Brahmacharya. Excuse my throat. So if we can reiterate in terms of what it actually was, in terms of what the actual restraint is, Brahmacharya is all to do with trying to avoid that sensory overload. It's trying to be restrained, practicing things in moderation, really being focused on sort of like sort of not restricting things, but basically just trying to really sort of, when you're doing a yoga practice, is really trying to really focus inwards, not sort of expanding outwards too much, and really trying to keep all the sort of the sensations and things you can actually feel with actually in your practice. So a yin yoga practice is actually really a unique type of practice, and I think it would actually lends itself really well to practicing Brahmacharya. Yin is slightly different from normal yoga in the fact that we're not actually using any strength of the muscles. A lot of yoga you tend to find you are holding the asanas for a certain time, but obviously you are building strength in the muscles. With yin it's very different in terms of what we're trying to do is take the pressure off the muscles, and really it's a nice way of just really elongating the whole body. So we do tend to hold the poses for quite a lot longer, maybe between 3 and 5 minutes. Don't panic. But what we're trying to do in that pose, we're actually fully supported in terms of we've got sort of normally have blocks, we normally use bolsters, we normally use lots of sort of props to actually help us into those positions, but then we just allow gravity to release. So it's really, really lovely for like working on connective tissues, into the joints. So it's a very different type of sensation, and it's a really, because we're holding the poses for so long, the main thing is trying to stop that mind from wandering off into all different directions, which does tend to happen. So the main thing really with yin is you need to put a little bit of strain on the body, so you need to have a sensation, but obviously we don't want any pain. So in terms of out of 0 out of 10, you're probably looking at about a 5, so you should feel something, and it's actually that stress that allows the body to release. The second thing with yin is obviously, apart from the fact you're holding the poses for a lot longer, is really, because you're holding those longer, is trying to really focus actually inwards on the body. So really have that point of focus on the sensations you can actually feel, and that's where the Brahmacharya comes in, I think, because really you're really honing your practice into more of a sort of more restricted sort of an internal journey rather than expanding outwards. So it's a really interesting one to try. As I said, normally we would use lots of props, but obviously a lot of people don't have props. So if you've got a yoga mat, or the floor is actually fine for this, to be honest with you, because you're not really going to be sort of needing something that's going to stop you slipping. Maybe a couple of blankets is also very useful. So we're going to start off, first of all, I'm going to try to make it as easy as I can. I'm only going to do 3 poses really, but the normal things apply. We normally do a forward bend and a backward bend. And normally we would do a twist, but I'm going to do a really nice restorative pose for the end of it. So we're going to come into a butterfly pose. You also will find with yin, the pose names are slightly different from the normal asana names, principally because if you said, oh, I'm going to go into Baddha Konasana, which is cobbler's pose, normally people would straight go into it, and then they would sort of put their bodies in a particular position. They're sort of like forcing it into a particular position and sort of like really working the muscles to get there. But with yin, we tend to use different names for the same pose, basically because it just clears that sort of like context of what we're actually trying to practice. So butterfly, it's quite nice to have your bottom raised up a little bit. So I would probably maybe use 1 or a couple of blankets folded up. I'm going to use a couple here because my hips are a bit tight this morning. So we're going to bring our bums onto those blankets. And the thing is, you don't have to wear socks with this one, so you don't have to worry too much about sliding. So we're going to bring the soles of the feet together. Now this is a really good pose because for opening up the hips, it's a really nice one to really release the lower back as well. So in terms of where you bring your feet, it doesn't really matter. If you want to bring them slightly further away, you can do. If you can bring them slightly closer, that's also fine. So what we're going to do, we're going to just allow ourselves just to come forward. So the main thing really is just allowing yourself just to really release down into the floor. And also it's nice just to have the palms facing up, because if you normally find if you've got your hands facing down, you will push yourself into a particular pose. So if you just allow yourself with the palms facing up, and then really what we're trying to do is just use gravity just to allow ourselves just to sink forward. So we will be staying here for about 3 or 5 minutes. So once we've got ourselves into a reasonably comfortable position where you can feel something, in terms of, as I said, if it's getting painful, obviously you need to release out of it a little bit more, and maybe raise the bottom up a little bit more, or bring something to support the knees if it's too strong on the inside of the thighs. So just allowing yourself just to sink. This is a really nice pose actually as well, so it's really supposed to stimulate the kidneys and also the prostate functions as well, so it's quite a nice one. You should feel a nice stretch in the lower back. Just allow those shoulders to release down the back. Really focus on that breath. Allow gravity just to let you come forward. You're not forcing anything, you're just really allowing stuff to just release. And just bring your focus into how you're feeling on a physical level. Really noticing the sensations maybe in the back or the hips. But also maybe notice on an emotional level as well. Muscles do hold memory, so it can be quite an emotive practice using Reiki. And so if you do feel any emotions coming up, particularly if you're working on the kidney meridians, you might find kidney relates to fear, so you might find if you have fearful thoughts or emotions, that's quite common. Best to have your eyes closed, but if you do feel you need to have them open, that's also very fine. Again, don't forget if your mind does go wandering off, just really bring it back to the focus of the breath. Be here for another minute or so. And slowly, very gently pushing up with our hands. I'm just going to bring a bit of release into the lower back. So we're going to bring the feet onto the floor, bring the hands behind us and very gently just move the legs from side to side. Just get a bit of circulation back in those legs. And again, just really slowly enjoying those sensations of movement. So yin is quite a slow practice, but it's actually really, really powerful. So you'd be surprised in the changes it can actually make in your body. It's actually one of my favourite types of yoga to teach actually. It's quite difficult to do as a video though, because obviously you do hold the poses for quite some time, and obviously you do need quite a lot of props normally, so it's quite restricted if you haven't got them. So we're going to do a nice back bend now. So again, blankets are really useful. So what we're going to do, I've got a couple here, so I'm going to roll that one up so it's nice, like a big tube. So I'm going to pop that there, and I'm going to pop my second blanket just at the far end of there. So it's maybe slightly lower. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow myself just to bring my bottom here and then come into a nice back bend. So ideally this should be between the shoulder blades. And then just allowing the head just to come back. So you've actually got a really nice open chest here. So it's slightly possibly uncomfortable between the shoulder blades, but again we are trying to look for a little bit of discomfort just to allow those muscles to release. Now in terms of your legs, I mean you can have your legs straight out in front of you, but if you have got lower back issues it might be advisable just to bend your knees a little bit, just to take that pressure off a little bit. But you might find the longer you hold it, the more the back releases, so you can then eventually very slowly just straighten the legs out. So we're going to bring the arms by the side. And again, just closing the eyes and just really focusing on the breath. And this is a really lovely one because it really helps the ribs expand, so you really get a nice full breath. Particularly after the last pose where you were quite closed off. Really nice just to release the back. So it's a really nice pose just to open up your heart chakra as well. So you're opening a little bit of the throat chakra as well because your head's slightly tilted back. Just to open up the shoulders as well, so just allow the shoulders just to roll down either side of the blanket underneath your shoulders. We'll stay here for a few more breaths, so maybe about another 4 minutes or so. thoughts wandering back off again. Just bringing them back, just reining them in. Maybe start by focusing on the breath. Lovely pose, just to really calm the whole body down. 4 minutes. And then slowly I'm going to ease ourselves out of this. So maybe just starting by bending the knees and then just rolling to one side before we come up to seated. So it's quite nice now just to do, coming onto all fours, just to release the lower back a little bit. So bringing the knees underneath your hips and your hands underneath your shoulders. I'm just going to do maybe some rocks from side to side, so just moving the hips from one side to another, just to get that mobility back into the lower back. And if you do feel you want to do some nice cat-cows, again just dropping the belly down towards the floor, bringing the head up and arching away. So just, using the body, moving around in a particular way that feels nice and good. Okay, so the last pose we're going to do now for this practice is actually quite nice. It's a restorative pose as well as being a yin pose as well. So it's actually called legs up the wall, which is pretty much self-explanatory. So it's a really useful one to do before you go to bed. It's a really lovely one. It really helps you sleep because the whole nervous system just really calms down. It's quite handy to have a couple of blankets, one for your bottom but also one for your head as well if you want to. So the way to get into this one is you get as close to the wall as you possibly can. So we're going to come in sideways onto the wall. So bring your bottom as close as you possibly can. And then slowly we're going to slide round, bring the feet up the wall and allow your head just to come down. Again, if you've got a blanket, you can pop that underneath your head to support your head. And if you're okay with it, what you can do is just fold your blanket up so it's nice, it's a bit more chunky. And then bring your feet onto the wall and just slowly raise your bottom up and just allow your bottom just to rest back onto the blanket. And again, it's a lovely one just to really calm the body down. And just really allow everything just to give way and release. Again, this pose you can stay in as long as you need to. I mean, sometimes it can be about 20 minutes. It's a really lovely pose. Sometimes you fall asleep in it, believe it or not. So we're going to just stay here for about 5 more minutes. Again, just allowing yourself to look inwards. Again, just notice how you're feeling on an emotional level. By now your head should be just calmed down enough just to really focus on the breath, on the sensations you can feel. You might feel stretching the back of the legs. Really opening up the heart. Also allows the breathing to become nice and steady. Just notice the fingers curling and releasing any tension. You notice if you're holding any tension in your jaw as well. It's just releasing that. It's quite nice to move the jaw from side to side. And moving the head slightly from side to side if you're holding any tension in the neck. slowly now, I'm going to release out of this pose. So just bringing the knees slowly in towards the chest. Again, taking your time. And we'll just really slow down. It's nice just to take our time, not rush back into our daily lives. And then very slowly rolling onto one side. And then just gently coming back up onto a seated pose. So again, if you're coming onto a blanket, just allow yourself just to come back into a nice upright position. And slowly focusing on the breath again, just allowing it to come in and out. And slowly bring the hands into the heart center and lowering the head. And thank you for joining me in this practice today. Namaste.